What would you do if the place you called home, the sanctuary you built with your own hands, was suddenly deemed unworthy by those who never understood its value? In the quiet hills of Willow Creek, where the air carried the scent of pine and wildflowers, Ethan Caldwell faced that very question. His cabin, a modest structure of weathered logs and dreams, stood as a testament to his resilience. But the Willow Creek Homeowners Association, led by the iron-fisted Karen Whitmore, had other plans. They called it an eyesore. Ethan called it his life. Ethan had moved to Willow Creek 5 years ago, fleeing the chaos of city life after losing his wife, Lila, to a sudden illness. The cabin was his refuge, each plank a piece of his healing. He'd carved out a simple existence, growing vegetables, tending to a small orchard, and volunteering at the local shelter. The townsfolk loved him except for the HOA group of self-appointed guardians of community standards. Karen, with her sharp suits and sharper tongue, ruled the board like a queen. Her mission, to make Willow Creek a polished, picture-perfect suburb no matter the cost. It started with a letter, slipped under Ethan's door at dawn. The HOA demanded he demolish his cabin within 48 hours, citing non-compliance with aesthetic regulations. Ethan's heart sank as he read the cold, bureaucratic words. His cabin, with its hand-hewn beams and wildflower garden, didn't fit their vision of manicured lawns and cookie-cutter homes. He had 2 days to erase his home, or they'd do it for him and bill him for it. Ethan's first instinct was to fight. He stormed to the HOA office, a sleek building that looked out of place among the rolling hills. Karen sat behind her desk, her smile as tight as her bun. "Mr. Caldwell," she said, her voice dripping with condescension, "your cabin is a blight. We're elevating Willow Creek's value. You're holding us back." "Value?" Ethan snapped, his hands trembling. "This is my home. I built it with my own hands. You can't just erase it." Karen leaned forward, her eyes glinting. "Oh, but we can. The bylaws are clear. You signed them when you bought the land. 48 hours, Mr. Caldwell, or we'll take legal action." Ethan left the office, his chest tight with rage. He wasn't a lawyer, nor was he rich. The HOA had money, power, and a team of attorneys ready to crush him. But Ethan wasn't one to roll over. He'd lost too much already to let Karen Whitmore dictate his future. That night, he sat by his fireplace, the crackling logs casting shadows on the walls. His eyes fell on a dusty folder in the Cornerland records and HOA documents he'd barely glanced at when he moved in. As he pored over them, a spark of an idea ignited. The HOA's power came from its members, but it also came from their dues. Ethan owned a small parcel of land adjacent to his cabin, leased to a few HOA members for their fancy gardens. He'd always charged a modest rent, barely enough to cover taxes. But what if he didn't play nice anymore? By morning, Ethan had a plan. He drafted letters to his tenants, Karen included, as she leased a plot for her prized roses. Effective immediately, their rent would triple. Dues for maintaining the shared access road, which ran through his property, would skyrocket. If the HOA wanted to play dirty, he'd rewrite the rules. The response was immediate. Karen arrived at his cabin, her face red with fury. "This is extortion," she shrieked, waving the letter. "You can't do this." Ethan leaned against his doorframe, calm but unyielding. "It's my land, Karen. I can charge what I want. You want to talk about fairness? Let's talk about you trying to bulldoze my home." The town buzzed with the news. Some called Ethan a hero, others a troublemaker. The HOA held an emergency meeting, and Ethan was summoned. The room was packed with residents, some sympathetic, others glaring. Karen stood at the podium, her voice sharp as she accused Ethan of blackmail. But then, a figure rose from the back of the room, a woman no one expected. Clara Hensley, a quiet widow who rarely spoke at meetings, stepped forward. She was an outsider like Ethan, living in a small cottage the HOA had also deemed substandard. Clara's hands shook as she held up an old photograph. "This," she said, her voice steady despite her nerves, "is my home before the HOA forced me to paint it beige. It was my husband's dream, just like Ethan's cabin is his. You people don't care about community, you care about control. The room fell silent. Clara's words hit like a thunderclap. Ethan hadn't known her story, but her courage shifted something in him. He wasn't alone. Others in Willow Creek were tired of Karen's reign, too. Whispers spread, and a few residents began to clap. Karen's composure cracked, her eyes darting as she realized she was losing the room. But Karen wasn't one to surrender. The next day, she escalated. The HOA filed for an injunction to force Ethan's compliance, and a bulldozer appeared at the edge of his property, its engine growling like a predator. Ethan stood in front of it, arms crossed, as Karen watched from her car. "Last chance, Caldwell," she called. "Tear it down or we will." Ethan didn't move. The driver hesitated, glancing between Ethan and Karen. Then, from the road, a group of townsfolk appeared, Clara at the front, joined by others who'd grown weary of the HOA's tyranny. They formed a human chain around the cabin, their faces set with defiance. The driver shut off the bulldozer and walked away. Karen was livid, but the tide had turned. The HOA's meeting that evening was chaos. Residents demanded transparency, questioning the board's finances and decisions. Clara revealed she'd found records of Karen misusing dues for personal projects like her rose garden. The room erupted. By the end of the night, Karen was voted out as president, and the demolition order was rescinded. Ethan should have felt victorious. His cabin was safe, and the HOA was in disarray. But as he stood on his porch that night, staring at the stars, a hollow ache settled in his chest. He'd won the battle, but at what cost? The town was divided, neighbors pitted against neighbors. Clara, who'd become his unexpected ally, confided that she was moving away, unable to bear the tension. "I just wanted peace," she whispered, her eyes tired. The next morning, Ethan walked to his orchard, where Lila's favorite tree, an old apple tree, stood. He'd planted it for her, a symbol of their love. As he touched its bark, he realized something bitter. His fight, though justified, had poisoned the community he'd grown to love. He'd raised rents out of spite, not justice, and it had hurt people who weren't his enemies. The cabin was still standing, but it felt less like home. Ethan made a choice. He lowered the rents back to their original rates and donated his small savings to repair the community center, hoping to mend the rift. But the damage was done. Some forgave him, others didn't. Karen, humiliated, left Willow Creek, but her absence didn't heal the wounds. Ethan stayed, tending his garden, but the joy was gone. Each creak of the cabin's floorboards reminded him of the fight, the division, the loss. One evening, as the sun dipped below the hills, Ethan sat by Lila's tree. He thought of her laughter, her warmth, and how she'd always believed in second chances. He wondered if he'd betrayed that belief in his quest for justice. The cabin, once his sanctuary, now felt like a monument to a Pyrrhic victory. He'd kept his home but lost the heart of it. Willow Creek would recover slowly. New voices would rise, and the HOA would reform. But for Ethan, the taste of triumph was bitter, laced with regret. He'd fought for his home, but in doing so, he'd dismantled something intangible, something Lila would have cherished more than any cabin. The community, the connection, the hope. ND.